My poor ex. What is this stray doing at my wedding?
The bride, Courtney Davis, froze mid-toast the moment she spotted him. Table 9, the only black man in the room. A name she hadn't said in years.
You crawl in here like some lost dog, hoping for scraps. Still can't get over me, huh? Know your place.
Adrian Moore kept his voice low.
I was invited, Courtney. I'm a guest on Grant's side. I came out of respect. I'd hoped for the same.
Respect? The boy from the gutter wants respect.
The groom wrapped his arm around her waist and laughed. 300 guests followed. Not one person looked Adrian in the eye. What none of them knew was that in the next 40 minutes, every laugh in that room would turn to silence.
Wow. And that was just the beginning. Because what Courtney did next, that's where things got ugly.
The music had stopped. The DJ's hand hovered over the console, unsure whether to play the next song or wait for the storm to pass. It didn't pass. Courtney set her champagne down on the nearest table and walked toward Adrian. Every step echoed on the marble floor. The ballroom at the Sullivan estate was built for elegance. Crystal chandeliers, white orchid centerpieces, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private lake. It was the kind of place where everything looked perfect on the outside.
Let me tell you something about this man,
Courtney announced, her voice carrying across every table. I dated him in college. Biggest mistake of my life. She stopped 3 feet from Adrian's chair. Broke, clueless, wore the same 2 shirts every week. His mother worked 3 cleaning jobs just to keep the lights on. She paused for effect. And he thought he deserved me. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Most just watched. Adrian didn't move. His jaw tightened, but his hands stayed still on the table. He'd learned a long time ago that reacting to cruelty only gave it more power. Courtney, the groom called from the head table. Come on, babe. Don't waste your breath. He's nobody.
Grant Sullivan, the groom, was the kind of man who measured people by what they owned. His father built Sullivan Property Group from the ground up. Grant inherited the title of VP, a corner office, and the belief that money made him untouchable. He looked at Adrian the way you'd look at a stain on a white tablecloth. Seriously, man, Grant said, swirling his whiskey, read the room. You don't belong here.
Adrian stood. Not fast, not aggressive, just stood, the way a man does when he's decided he won't sit through one more word. I was invited, Adrian said, steady and clear, and I've done nothing wrong. Grant smirked. Invited out of pity, maybe. The best man, Grant's older brother, Derek Sullivan, leaned back in his chair and cracked his knuckles. Big arms, cold eyes. Want me to walk him out? Derek asked. Not a question, a threat. Adrian looked at the room. 300 faces. Not one ally. And the night was just getting started. Derek didn't wait for permission. He pushed back his chair and crossed the ballroom in 6 long strides. The man was built like a former linebacker. Wide shoulders, thick neck, the kind of frame that made people step aside without being asked. He stopped inches from Adrian's face. You got 5 seconds, Derek said. Walk out that door, or I carry you out. Adrian didn't flinch. He could smell the bourbon on Derek's breath, could see the vein pulsing at the side of his neck. I haven't done anything to anyone in this room, Adrian said quietly. I came because your brother invited me. If he wants me to leave, he can tell me himself. Derek grabbed the back of Adrian's chair and yanked it away. The metal legs screeched across the marble. Guests at the surrounding tables pulled back. A woman clutched her pearls. A man covered his daughter's eyes. I said 5 seconds, Derek repeated. Adrian stood his ground, hands at his sides. No fists, no raised voice. I'll leave when I'm asked respectfully. Derek laughed, a short, ugly bark. Respectfully? You think you're at some board meeting? He leaned closer. You're at a party you were never supposed to be at. Act accordingly. Courtney appeared beside her brother. Her smile was gone. What replaced it was something colder, the look of someone who wanted to make a point.
You know what your problem always was, Adrian? She said. You always thought you were better than what you are. But look around.
She gestured at the chandeliers, the champagne towers, the guests in designer gowns and tailored suits. This is where people like us end up. And you end up alone at table 9. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the room. Not everyone laughed, but enough did. Adrian felt the heat crawl up the back of his neck. Not from embarrassment, from control. The kind of control it takes to stand still when every muscle in your body wants to move. Courtney, he said, his voice even, we were together for 2 years. I never once disrespected you. I'm asking you to return that courtesy. Courtesy? Courtney stepped back and placed a hand over her chest in mock surprise. You want courtesy? From me? You showed up to my wedding. I was invited.
Wearing some off-the-rack suit, trying to prove what? That you've made something of yourself? She looked him up and down. Please. Grant's voice came from behind. Babe, let it go. He's not worth the oxygen. But Courtney wasn't done. She turned to the nearest table, a cluster of Grant's business associates and their wives, and raised her voice so the whole room could hear. Let me tell you who Adrian Moore really is. He grew up in Section 8 housing on the South Side. His daddy left before he could walk. His mama scrubbed toilets so he could eat. The room went dead silent. And when we dated, sophomore year, he couldn't even take me to dinner. Not once. I had to pay for everything, every single time. She held up her ring finger. So I upgraded. The diamond caught the chandelier light and threw tiny rainbows across the ceiling. Adrian said nothing. His eyes stayed on Courtney's face, steady and unreadable. Grant walked over now, whiskey in hand, chest puffed. He put his arm around Courtney's waist and kissed her temple. See this? Grant said, raising his glass toward Adrian. This is what success looks like, bro. A beautiful wife, a beautiful venue, a beautiful life. He took a sip. You should take notes. A wave of laughter rolled through the room, louder this time. Grant soaked it in like applause. He was performing now, playing the role of the alpha in his own kingdom, making sure every guest knew who owned the room. Adrian watched him, the way you watch someone dig a hole they don't know they'll fall into. Derek moved closer again. This time he put his hand on Adrian's shoulder, not gently. Last chance, Derek said. Out the door. Now. An older woman at table 3, silver hair, pearl earrings, clearly someone's grandmother, looked away. She folded her napkin carefully and placed it on her plate. She didn't say a word. A young couple at table 12 whispered to each other. The woman shook her head slightly. The man looked at his shoes. A bartender at the back wiped the same glass 3 times without looking up. He'd seen this before. Not at weddings, but in bars. The moment when a room picks a side, and the losing side has no one. No one moved. That silence, thick, humid, suffocating, was louder than anything Courtney had said. Because silence in a room full of people isn't neutral. It's a vote. And every person in that ballroom had just voted. Adrian looked at Derek's hand on his shoulder, then at Grant, then at Courtney. You done? Adrian asked. Courtney blinked. Excuse me? Are you done? Because I've listened to every word. I haven't interrupted. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't insulted anyone in this room. He paused. Can you say the same? For a half second, something flickered across Courtney's face. It wasn't guilt. Not yet. It was surprise.
The surprise of someone who expected their target to crumble and instead found concrete. Grant stepped forward. Who do you think you're talking to? You're a guest in my house. My wedding, my rules. Your guest, Adrian repeated. Exactly, your guest, and this is how you treat them. Grant's jaw tightened. He set his whiskey down on the nearest table with a sharp clink.
Get him out, Grant said to Derek. I don't care how.
Derek grabbed Adrian's arm, hard. The grip left fingerprints on the fabric of his suit jacket. Adrian didn't pull away. He just looked down at the hand, then back up at Derek. You're going to want to let go, Adrian said. Or what? Derek squeezed harder. What are you going to do? Nothing, Adrian said. I don't need to. That answer hung in the air like smoke. Nobody understood it. Not yet. Derek shoved Adrian toward the door. Adrian stumbled one step, caught himself, and straightened his jacket. The shove echoed, not just in sound, but in the way a dozen guests flinched. Yeah, walk away, Courtney shouted from behind. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. But Adrian didn't walk. He turned back around, not with anger, with stillness. That stopped the room. I'm not leaving because you told me to, Adrian said. I'll leave when I decide to leave. Grant set his whiskey down. The clink of glass against marble was the only sound. You serious right now? Grant said. He stepped past Courtney, unbuttoning his suit jacket. You come to my wedding. You upset my wife. And now you're making demands? I'm not making demands. I'm standing.
Standing where you don't belong, Grant shot back. Look around, man. Look at these people. Doctors, lawyers, people who actually made something of themselves.
He gestured around the room.
And then there's you.
Adrian's jaw tightened, but his feet didn't move. Grant turned to the head of security, a broad man in a black polo stationed near the entrance, and snapped his fingers. Ray, get this man out of my venue. Now. Ray, 6'4", built like a refrigerator, walked over with the practiced calm of someone who had removed people before. He stopped in front of Adrian and lowered his voice. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. On what grounds? Adrian asked. Ray hesitated. He looked back at Grant. On the grounds that the host wants you gone, Grant said loudly. What other grounds do you need? Adrian looked at Ray. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't touched anyone. I haven't broken a single rule. You know that. Ray knew it. His eyes said so, but his paycheck said something else. Sir, please, Ray said quietly. Don't make this harder. Adrian nodded slowly, not in agreement, in understanding. He understood exactly what was happening and who held the leash. Courtney wasn't done. She walked back toward Adrian, heels clicking like a countdown. You want to know the real reason I left you? She said. The room leaned in. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the clothes or the apartment with roaches. She stopped, close enough for only him to hear, but she said it loud enough for everyone. It was because being with you embarrassed me. Walking next to you embarrassed me. Introducing you to my friends? I couldn't. I literally could not bring myself to say, this is my boyfriend. Because what would they think? Her voice cracked. Not from sadness, but from the performance of cruelty she had rehearsed in her own head for years. You were beneath me then, and you're beneath me now. The words hit like stones, one after another, precise, calculated, designed to break. Adrian's hand trembled, just once. He pressed it flat against his thigh. Are you finished? He asked. Oh, I'm just getting started, baby. Courtney smiled. Tell them about your mother. Tell them how she used to beg the landlord for extra time on rent. Tell them how she cried at the kitchen table every night. Don't. One word. Low. final. The entire room felt the shift. Adrian's voice hadn't gotten louder, it had gotten heavier. Courtney blinked. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't expected, the edge of a line she shouldn't cross. But Grant didn't feel it.
Oh, did we hit a nerve?
Grant laughed. He looked around at his guests. Ladies and gentlemen, apparently we're not allowed to talk about Mommy. A few scattered laughs, weaker this time. The energy was shifting. Some guests looked down at their plates. A woman near the back quietly picked up her purse. But nobody left. Nobody spoke.
The photographer, a young woman with a camera slung around her neck, lowered her lens. She hadn't taken a shot in 5 minutes. She stood near the far wall, fingers tight around the strap, watching the scene with the expression of someone who would remember this night long after the album was delivered. The DJ had killed the music without being told. The speakers hummed with dead air. Even he knew this wasn't the kind of moment you put a soundtrack to.
Derek cracked his neck and moved toward Adrian again. All right, show's over. You had your moment. Time to go. Adrian looked at Derek, then at Grant, then at Courtney. Something behind his eyes settled, the way water settles before it freezes. You're right, Adrian said calmly. The show is over. He turned and walked toward the exit. No stumble this time, no hesitation. Each step measured, deliberate, unhurried, the kind of walk that said, this isn't retreat, this is a decision.
Courtney grabbed Grant's arm and whispered something. Grant grinned and raised his glass. A toast, Grant announced, to marrying up! The room erupted. Glasses clinked. Music started again. The party moved on, as if Adrian Moore had never existed. But Adrian hadn't left the building. He stopped just inside the lobby.
The marble floor stretched out beneath fluorescent light, and the muffled bass of the reception thumped through the walls behind him. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a single call. It's me, he said. Bring the cars around. All 3. He ended the call, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and adjusted his cuffs, the same way a man adjusts his armor before walking back into battle. Outside, the evening sky had turned deep purple. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and lake water. A quiet night. The kind of night where nothing is supposed to go wrong. 3 black SUVs rolled through the estate gates, headlights cutting through the dusk, and lined up at the main entrance, engines running, doors still closed. The valet stared. The security guard at the front gate reached for his radio. Inside the ballroom, no one noticed. They were too busy celebrating.
They had no idea what was coming. Because Adrian, he made one phone call, and that changed everything.
Adrian stood in the lobby, with his phone still warm in his hand. Behind the double doors, the music had picked up again, a Sinatra classic, the kind of song people slow dance to at weddings while pretending the world is perfect. He could still hear the laughter. Not all of it was aimed at him, but enough was. The kind of laughter that doesn't fade, the kind that burrows into your chest and builds a nest there. Adrian loosened his tie. Just slightly. He closed his eyes and took one breath. Then another. He wasn't shaking anymore. Whatever storm had been building inside him, he'd sealed it shut. For now. The lobby doors swung open. Ray, the head of security, stepped out. His face had changed, softer now, almost apologetic.
Hey, man,
Ray said, low enough that no one else could hear. Look, I know that was messed up in there. I do. But I need you to leave the property. Mr. Sullivan wants you gone. Adrian opened his eyes. You saw what happened. I did. And? Ray exhaled through his nose. He looked at the floor. And I got 2 kids at home, and a mortgage I can't miss. I'm sorry.
There it was. The math of silence. Everyone in that ballroom had their own version of it, their own reason for looking away, their own excuse for not speaking. Ray held the door open, not aggressively, almost gently, the way someone holds open a door when they know they're doing the wrong thing but can't afford to do the right one. Adrian didn't argue. He stepped toward the exit.
But before he could reach it, the door burst open from the other side. Grant's best man, a tall, ruddy-faced man named Bryce Coleman, walked in with his phone to his ear. "Yeah, he's still here," Bryce said into the phone. He looked at Adrian like something stuck to the bottom of the shoe. "No, I'll handle it." Bryce ended the call and squared up to Adrian.
"Grant says if you're not off the property in 2 minutes, we're calling the cops." He smiled, the thin, practiced smile of a man who had never been told no. "And trust me, buddy, when they show up and see you standing in a place like this, they're not going to ask questions." The threat was specific, calculated. It didn't need to be explained.
Adrian felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. Not because it was new, but because it was familiar. He'd felt that same weight in college hallways, in job interviews, in rooms where he was the only one who looked like him. "You're threatening to call the police," Adrian said flatly, "on a man standing in a lobby." "I'm protecting the groom's property," Bryce said. "You're trespassing." "I was invited. Invitation's been revoked." Bryce pulled out his phone again. 1 minute, 50 seconds. Ray shifted uncomfortably behind them. He looked at Adrian, then at Bryce, then at the floor again. Adrian turned to Ray. "You're just going to stand there?" Ray said nothing. His jaw worked back and forth like he was chewing on words he couldn't swallow. Adrian nodded. Message received. He walked toward the main entrance. Through the glass doors, he could see the 3 black SUVs parked in a perfect line. Headlights off now. Engines idling. Dark windows reflecting the last stripe of sunset. But Adrian didn't go to them. Not yet. Instead, he sat down on a bench just outside the entrance, hands on his knees, back straight, facing the parking lot. The evening breeze carried the scent of roses from the garden, the same roses that lined the aisle Courtney had walked down 3 hours ago. Bryce followed him out. "What are you doing? I said leave." "I'm outside the building," Adrian said, "on a bench, in a parking lot." "You're on Sullivan property." "It's a rented venue, Bryce, not his kingdom." Adrian looked up. "And the last time I checked, sitting on a bench isn't a crime." Bryce's face went red. He wasn't used to calm. He was used to people folding. "Fine," Bryce said, pulling up his phone. "I'm calling." "Go ahead." Bryce dialed. Adrian watched him do it. No panic, no plea, just watched. The way a man watches a child throw a tantrum they'll regret. Inside the ballroom, the celebration continued. Courtney was dancing with her father. Grant was doing shots with his college buddies at the bar. Someone had started a conga line. The photographer was capturing every smile, every embrace, every carefully curated moment of joy. Nobody mentioned Adrian. Nobody asked where he went. Nobody said, "Hey, maybe that was too far." He had been erased. At table 3, the older woman with silver hair, the one who had looked away, excused herself to the restroom. On her way out, she passed through the lobby. She saw the empty chair where Adrian had sat. She paused for a moment, her lips parted, like she wanted to say something to someone. But there was no one to say it to. So she smoothed her dress and kept walking. At table 12, the young couple who had whispered to each other sat in silence. The woman stirred her drink. The man stared at the centerpiece. Neither of them was smiling. The woman leaned over and whispered, "That was wrong." The man nodded. But neither of them moved. Neither of them stood. Knowing something is wrong and doing something about it are 2 very different things. The guilt was there. It just wasn't loud enough yet. Back outside, Adrian sat motionless on the bench. The SUVs hummed behind him, like sleeping giants. His phone buzzed. A text from a number saved as Nora. "Everything okay? You've been quiet." Adrian typed back, "Handled. Be there in 20. He didn't explain what handled meant. He didn't need to. Bryce came back through the glass doors. His expression had changed. Less aggressive, more confused. "Cops said they won't come unless there's an actual disturbance," Bryce said. "Something about it being a civil matter." Adrian almost smiled. Almost. "Imagine that," he said. Bryce stared at him. For the first time, something that looked like doubt crossed his face. Not guilt. Men like Bryce didn't do guilt easily. But doubt. The faint, uncomfortable feeling that maybe he'd picked the wrong side. "Who are you?" Bryce asked. Adrian looked at him. "Tonight? I'm just a guest at a wedding." "No," Bryce said. "I mean, who are you really? Because nobody sits through what you just sat through and stays this calm unless they know something the rest of us don't." Adrian said nothing. He just looked at the SUVs. Bryce followed his gaze. 3 identical vehicles, blacked-out windows, government-grade tinting, the kind of cars that don't belong at a wedding unless someone very important is inside them, or waiting to step out. "Whose cars are those?" Bryce asked. Adrian stood up, brushed off his jacket, straightened his tie. "You'll find out soon enough," he said. He pulled out his phone one more time and sent a single text. "Come inside. All of you." The doors of the first SUV opened. The first door opened. A woman stepped out, mid-30s, sharp black blazer, hair pulled into a tight bun. She carried a leather portfolio under one arm and a phone in the other. She walked like someone whose calendar was booked 6 months in advance.
Her name was Nora Ellison, Chief Operating Officer of Pinnacle Ventures. The second SUV opened. 2 men in dark suits emerged. One carried a briefcase. The other had an earpiece. They flanked the vehicle like sentries. The third SUV opened last. A man in his 50s, salt and pepper beard, reading glasses tucked into his breast pocket, stepped onto the gravel. He looked around the estate, nodded once, and buttoned his jacket. His name was Gerald Whitmore, Senior Legal Counsel. 30 years of corporate law. The kind of man whose presence in a room made other lawyers go quiet. Bryce stood frozen at the entrance. His phone hung limply in his hand. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Nora approached Adrian first. She didn't shake his hand. She didn't need to. They'd worked together for 6 years. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough," Adrian said.
Nora glanced at the ballroom doors. The muffled sound of music and laughter leaked through. She looked back at Adrian. "You want the full team in there?" "Yes." "All files?" "Everything on Sullivan Property Group. Every document. Every number." Nora opened her portfolio and handed Adrian a folder. He didn't open it. He already knew what was inside. Gerald stepped forward. "Adrian, are you sure about this? Once we walk in there, there's no quiet version." Adrian looked at him. "Gerald, I sat in that room for 45 minutes. A woman I once cared about called me a stray. Her husband told me I don't belong. His brother put his hands on me, and 300 people watched it happen like it was entertainment." He paused. "There is no quiet version." Gerald nodded. He adjusted his glasses and picked up his briefcase. "Then let's go." The team moved toward the entrance. 5 people, 3 SUVs, 1 folder, and the kind of silence that comes before everything changes. Bryce pressed himself against the wall as they passed. His eyes were wide. He reached for his phone, probably to text Grant, but his hands were shaking too hard to type. Adrian stopped in front of him. "You gave me 2 minutes to leave," Adrian said. "I'm giving you a choice. Walk in there with us or stay out here. But either way, what happens next happens." Bryce didn't move. He didn't follow. He just stood there, watching 5 people walk into a wedding reception like they were walking into a courtroom. The ballroom doors opened.
The music didn't stop right away. It took a few seconds. The DJ was mid-track, something upbeat, something with horns. But one by one, heads turned. First the tables near the door, then the middle rows, then the head table. Nora walked in first, then Gerald, then the 2 security personnel, and behind them, Adrian.
Not the same Adrian who had been shoved toward the exit an hour ago. Same suit, same face, same man, but something had shifted. The way the room looked at him had changed, because the people standing behind him changed what he meant. Grant saw them first. His champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. He squinted, trying to understand what he was seeing. Who are these people? Courtney turned. The color drained from her face in real time, like watching a photograph fade. Adrian? She whispered. Derek stood up from his chair. Instinct, muscle memory, protect the family. But Gerald raised one hand. Palm out, calm, unbothered, and Derek hesitated. Something about that hand said, don't. Adrian walked to the center of the dance floor, the same spot where Courtney had humiliated him. The same marble tiles, the same golden light from the chandeliers. But the dynamic was reversed.
My name is Adrian Moore,
he said. Not loud, not angry, just clear. And most of you in this room know me as the man who was just publicly humiliated at table 9. Silence. Complete. The air conditioning hummed. Someone's phone buzzed in a purse. That was it. What none of you know is that I'm the founder and CEO of Pinnacle Ventures. The name hit the room like a brick through glass.
Pinnacle Ventures, a $200 million investment fund, one of the fastest-growing firms in the Northeast, featured in Forbes twice, Bloomberg once. The kind of company that didn't chase money. Money chased it. Grant's face went white, because Grant knew the name.
He knew it very well. Sullivan Property Group, his father's company, the company he was set to inherit, had been seeking investment from Pinnacle Ventures for the last 18 months, a deal worth $45 million, a deal that would fund their expansion into 3 new markets, a deal that sat on Adrian Moore's desk. No, Grant said, barely a whisper. No, that's not...
Nora stepped forward and opened the portfolio. She held up a single document, a letter on Pinnacle Ventures letterhead, signed at the bottom by Adrian Moore, CEO. Mr. Sullivan, Nora said, her voice carrying the flat precision of someone who had delivered bad news professionally for over a decade. Pinnacle Ventures has been in active discussions with Sullivan Property Group regarding a $45 million investment package. As of tonight, that discussion is under formal review. Grant's glass slipped. Champagne splashed across his shoes. He didn't notice. You're him, Grant stammered. You're the guy from Pinnacle. Adrian didn't answer the question. He didn't need to. Gerald opened his briefcase and set 3 folders on the nearest table, each one stamped with the Pinnacle Ventures logo. What you're looking at, Gerald said, is a preliminary audit request for Sullivan Property Group, financial disclosures, partnership agreements, and internal communications, all subject to review before any investment proceeds. Grant looked at the folders like they were loaded weapons. This is my wedding, he said, his voice cracked. You can't do this at my wedding. You're right, Adrian said. This is your wedding. The same wedding where you told me I don't belong. The same wedding where your wife called me a stray. The same wedding where your brother put his hands on me. And you laughed. Adrian took one step closer to Grant. I didn't come here tonight to make a scene, Grant. I came because you invited me. Because 10 years ago, we sat in the same dorm, took the same classes, and called each other friends. He paused. You changed, not me. The room was a photograph. Nobody breathed. Courtney's hands were shaking. She looked at Grant, then at Adrian,
then at the team standing behind him. The math was rewriting itself in her head. Every insult, every jab, every word she'd said in front of 300 people about the broke boy from the South Side. That broke boy owned the fund her husband was begging to invest in his company. Grant grabbed Courtney's wrist, not gently. "Did you know?" he hissed. "Did you know who he was?"
Courtney yanked her arm free. "How would I know? We dated in college. He had nothing." "He had nothing?" Grant's voice rose. "He runs a $200 million fund, and you stood there and called him a stray, in front of his own COO, in front of his lawyer, in front of—" He couldn't finish. The sentence collapsed under its own weight. At the back of the room, a man in a gray suit pulled out his phone and started recording. Then another, then 3 more. The blue glow of screens dotted the ballroom like fireflies. The moment was no longer private. It was evidence. The older woman at table 3, the one with silver hair, set her napkin down. This time she didn't look away. She looked directly at Adrian, and she nodded. Grant's mouth opened and closed, twice, 3 times, like a man drowning in a room full of air. "Adrian, listen." His voice had changed completely. The swagger was gone. The whiskey-smooth confidence had evaporated. What was left sounded like a man trying to negotiate with a hurricane. Let's talk about this. We can go somewhere private. Work this out." "Private?" Adrian said. "You didn't humiliate me in private, Grant. You did it right here, in front of every person in this room." Grant looked at his guests. The same faces that had laughed with him 5 minutes ago now stared at him with something between shock and judgment. The shift was visible, like watching a tide reverse. I didn't know," Grant said. "Didn't know what? That I was someone worth respecting?" Adrian let that sit. "Would it have mattered? If I wasn't the CEO of Pinnacle? If I was just Adrian Moore from the South Side with no money and no title? Would that make what you did okay?" Grant had no answer. Because the honest answer was yes. And everyone in the room knew it. Courtney stepped forward. Her mascara had started to run. Not from tears, from sweat. The hot, prickling sweat of someone watching their own choices collapse around them in real time. "Adrian, I was just... It was the champagne. I didn't mean..." "You didn't mean to call me a stray," Adrian said. "You didn't mean to mock my mother. You didn't mean to tell 300 people I was born at the bottom and that's where I'd stay." Each sentence landed like a gavel. "You meant every word, Courtney. You meant it because you believed it. And the worst part isn't what you said. It's that you thought you'd never have to answer for it." Courtney's lip trembled. She reached for Grant's arm. He pulled away, not because he was angry at her, but because he was doing his own math. The kind of math that calculates how much a marriage costs when it just destroyed a $45 million deal. Derek stood up again, this time slower. The aggression was gone. What replaced it was confusion. The expression of a man who had spent his whole life solving problems with his size and suddenly realized he was in a room where size meant nothing. "Look, man," Derek said, I shouldn't have grabbed you. I get that now." Adrian turned to him. "You didn't just grab me, Derek. You shoved me in front of 300 people because your sister told you to." Derek's eyes dropped to the floor. Gerald stepped forward and addressed the room. Not Grant, not Courtney. The room. "For the record," Gerald said, adjusting his glasses, "what occurred tonight, the verbal harassment, the physical contact, the attempted removal, has been documented. Mr. Moore's security team has been recording from the moment they entered the venue." A murmur rippled through the guests. Heads turned. The 2 security personnel from the SUVs stood near the entrance. One of them held a small device in his hand, a body camera, recording everything. Grant's face shifted from white to green. You recorded this?" he said. "Standard protocol," Nora said calmly.
When our CEO informs us of a hostile situation, we document for legal purposes. Legal? Grant's voice broke on the word. You're going to, what, sue me? At my own wedding? Adrian shook his head. I'm not here to sue you, Grant. I'm not here to destroy you. If I wanted to do that, I could have done it from my office on Monday morning with one phone call. He paused, let the room breathe. I'm here because I want you to understand something. Every person in this room watched what happened tonight. They watched you and your wife tear a man apart for being black, for being poor, for being from the wrong neighborhood. And nobody, not one person, said stop. Adrian looked at the crowd, table by table, face by face. That's not just a problem with Grant and Courtney. That's a problem with this room. The silence was surgical. It cut through every excuse, every rationalization, every I didn't want to get involved that had kept 300 mouths shut. The older woman at table 3, silver hair, pearl earrings, stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor, and every head turned. He's right, she said. Her voice was thin but steady. I watched the whole thing, and I said nothing. That's on me. A beat of silence. Then the young man at table 12 stood. She's right. We all just sat here. One voice, then two, then a low murmur of agreement that spread through the ballroom like a cracking dam. Grant looked around. His empire of laughter had collapsed. The same people who had raised their glasses to his toast now wouldn't meet his eyes. Nora closed her portfolio and looked at Grant. Mr. Sullivan, regarding the Pinnacle investment, here's what happens next. We will conduct a full financial and ethical audit of Sullivan Property Group. Every record, every transaction, every internal communication. If everything checks out, the investment proceeds on our terms. If it doesn't, she paused. You already know what happens. Grant swallowed. The sound was audible. Adrian straightened his jacket. The same jacket Derek had grabbed. The same jacket he'd smoothed after being shoved. It looked different now. Not because the fabric had changed, but because the man wearing it had just rearranged the power structure of the entire room without raising his voice once. One more thing, Adrian said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a white envelope, the wedding invitation. He set it on the nearest table. I came tonight because I believed in the friendship we had, Grant. I came because I thought people could grow. He tapped the envelope once. I was wrong about you, but I hope, for your sake, that tonight changes that. Adrian turned and walked toward the exit. Nora fell into step beside him. Gerald followed. The 2 security personnel brought up the rear. 5 people, 3 SUVs, 1 man who had been called astray an hour ago, now walking out with more dignity than anyone left behind. The ballroom was silent except for the sound of his footsteps on the marble floor. Nobody laughed. Nobody clapped. Nobody moved. Because for the first time that night, 300 people understood exactly who had been standing at table 9. The SUVs pulled away from the estate at exactly 9:47 p.m. Adrian sat in the back of the middle vehicle. Nora was beside him, scrolling through her phone. Gerald sat up front, already drafting the audit letter. Nobody spoke for the first 2 minutes. The only sound was tires on gravel and the low hum of the engine. You okay? Nora asked without looking up. Adrian loosened his tie. I will be. She nodded. That was enough. Back inside the ballroom, the wedding was over, even if the music was still playing. Grant stood at the head table alone. His champagne sat untouched. His phone was in his hand, but he hadn't unlocked it. He just stared at it, like a man waiting for a call that would fix everything, knowing it wouldn't come. His father, Richard Sullivan, had already been told. The old man called from his lake house 12 minutes after Adrian's team walked out. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. You did what? Richard said. To whom? When Grant explained, the line went quiet. Then Richard said 5 words that would echo through every Sullivan family dinner for the next decade. "You may have destroyed us." Courtney had locked herself in the bridal suite. The $5,000 dress was crumpled on the bathroom floor. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, mascara streaking down her chin, replaying every word she'd said. Stray. Gutter. Know your place.
She had said those things to a man whose signature could determine whether her husband's company survived the next fiscal quarter. But that wasn't the part that kept looping in her head. It was his face. The way he'd looked at her when she mentioned his mother. Not with anger. With something worse. Disappointment. She picked up her phone. Opened Adrian's contact. Still saved from college. Never deleted. She typed 3 words. "I'm so sorry." She stared at them for a long time. Then deleted them. Because she knew sorry wasn't enough. And she knew he knew it too. Derek sat in the parking lot in his truck, engine off, hands on the steering wheel. He kept looking at his right hand, the one that had grabbed Adrian's arm, the one that had shoved him. He thought about what Gerald had said. Documented, recorded, legal purposes. He thought about his 2 kids at home. His custody arrangement. What a harassment charge would do to his next hearing. And for the first time in his life, Derek Sullivan wished he had been the kind of man who stayed in his seat. The days that followed were surgical. Monday morning. Pinnacle Ventures issued a formal review notice to Sullivan Property Group. Every financial record from the past 5 years. Every partnership contract. Every internal email. The $45 million deal was frozen, not canceled, frozen. Which was worse because it meant Grant had to cooperate fully while knowing the outcome was no longer in his hands.
By Wednesday, the story had leaked. Not from Adrian. From the guests. 300 people couldn't keep a secret. A local journalist picked it up, then a regional outlet. Then it was everywhere. The headline read, "Wedding humiliation goes wrong. Bride mocks ex. Turns out he's a $200 million CEO." The internet did what the internet does. Comments poured in by the thousands. Some angry, some sympathetic, most just stunned.
Grant released a public statement through his lawyer. It was carefully worded, full of phrases like regrettable misunderstanding and taken out of context and committed to personal growth. Nobody believed it. Courtney deleted all her social media accounts within 48 hours. The memes were already circulating. Screenshots of her bridal photos next to the headline, parody videos, the kind of public accountability that no PR firm can undo. Adrian never made a statement. Not one interview. Not one post. His office released a single line. Pinnacle Ventures does not comment on personal matters involving its leadership. That silence said more than any press conference ever could, but privately, in his office overlooking the city skyline, Adrian sat with a framed photograph on his desk. His mother, Evelyn Moore, taken the day he graduated from business school. She was smiling so wide her eyes had disappeared. She had scrubbed floors. She had begged landlords. She had cried at the kitchen table. And she had raised a man who, when the whole room turned against him, didn't break. 6 months later, Sullivan Property Group passed the audit. Barely. The deal went through, but at half the original amount. New terms, new oversight, new conditions that made it clear who held the power and who had earned it. Grant and Courtney's marriage survived, but it was quieter now. The kind of quiet that comes after you've seen the worst version of yourself in a room full of mirrors. Courtney started volunteering at a community outreach center downtown. She never told anyone why. She didn't need to. Derek enrolled in an anger management program. Not because a court ordered it, because his daughter asked him why a man on the internet said her daddy was a bully. That question broke something in him, something that needed breaking. The older woman from table 3, the one who finally stood up, wrote Adrian a letter. 2 pages, handwritten. She apologized for her silence and thanked him for his grace. Adrian read it twice and kept it in his desk drawer next to his mother's photograph. And Adrian Moore never spoke about that night publicly. Not one interview, not one post. He didn't need to. The way he walked out of that ballroom, back straight, voice steady, dignity intact, said everything that words couldn't. Some people build power to destroy others. Adrian built it to protect himself. The difference matters.
Man, this one hit differently. Look, the story's fiction. But that silence? That room full of people who just watched? That's real life. Every single day.